see, let me just go left to right. Myself, Chris Allgaier, Alfred is on, Courtney is on, Joe Aberdale is on, Skip is on, Will Sullivan, maybe Skip again, Jude, Mike Travato, Dan Hort. Did I miss anyone? Okay, so we have a quorum, Courtney, so you can go ahead and start recording. And the purpose of today's discussion is to take a look at the grant application we had submitted for the Massachusetts Dredging Program and make sure it still aligns with the timeline. And I think for that, there were some items that Will and possibly Mike had raised. So Will, could you give us a background on it and either any conversations or additional information that would inform our discussion?
Yeah, the reason for that letter is it came about from a request for information. Basically, what was said was that this money cannot be carried over into another fiscal year. So whatever is awarded from a grant process or this grant process has to be used in this fiscal year. And going in the future where we'd be looking at more grants, if we do not use this grant will be wasted. And we will be penalized going forward for wasting a grant in the next fiscal year.
That's penalized as in
as in we look really bad.
Excuse me?
Yes. Yeah.
And this came from the office, the dredging program
Housing
itself?
and Economic Development. Yeah, Housing and Economic Development.
Yes.
That's who handles it. So that was why we thought about rescinding the grant application. So that way we don't have to go through an award process and then not use a grant.
Right.
Because there's a slight and slim margin that'll be even available for us to do the piggyback.
Is there a timeline when you would have to inform them? In other words, this letter is May 16th, 2020. Would it be notified in October or something?
They get the grants out by the end of June. They've picked who they award, then they award it right away. So, I mean, the grant doesn't wait to go out until October. The grant comes out at the end of next month.
Right, but if somebody had an issue, like we're in a coronavirus, is it such that if it went beyond notifying them beyond July or June 30th that...
No, the grant will be awarded by then.
So, and as you had mentioned, it has to be spent in this fiscal year, or which ends June 30 of 21. Although as a practical matter for us, we end effectively in December because that's the end of the dredging window.
Correct.
So the question along the lines of what Skip is raising perhaps is, and perhaps we can have a dialogue with someone in the economic office. We certainly would know, well, obviously by December, if we are unable to dredge because the Corps of Engineers used that entire period, could we notify them then and they would have a backup plan, and that backup plan would still have 6 months?
No, we can't.
So who told you that?
That was, like I said, right from the Housing and Economic Development. Again, they award the grant before the end of this fiscal year, the end of next month. And then what will happen is we won't be able to use it by the end of the fiscal year. They need to award the grant prior to this. They award the grant right away.
Will, who are you? I forget the guy's name there. Was it Nicholas Bowens?
Yes, it is. Secretary Keneally's office.
Right, but specifically Nicholas.
Yeah, again, if the grant is awarded to us, it's awarded this June.
Right.
It takes place, we get it July. So we can't wait until October, November, December when we can't use it to tell them, no, we don't want it. We've already gotten it by then. There's no
Sounds like-
returning the grant.
It
Once the
sounds like-
money is allocated, it's it.
It sounds like to me, by accepting this grant, if we do, we're almost playing Russian roulette with the future. Because if we can't dredge in this window and we don't use the money up, we're screwing the mechanism up. Is that correct, Will?
Yes, exactly.
So my concern is to take a small amount of money. I shouldn't say that, excuse me. It's a lot of money. Not any money for free is a lot, don't get me wrong. But if we don't get this dredged on the piggyback program, at that point, and we may not know if we don't get it dredged until December, because everything could go well and then we could have one storm and they not do this. At that point, we didn't spend the money that we were allocated. And we went through all these hoops, not us, but the funding agent, for us not to use it. That's going to give us negative marks in the next round too, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a key point. We certainly don't want to penalize ourselves in the future. That's a very key item to understand.
I think
No,
that's the
because we're
whole,
looking for full funding. So.
because my problem with this is we don't even know what ratio we're going to need for the next round with the state. We believe we know what we're going to need. But if we take the money to do the small area, and this is a very small area through this grant, and we get rejected for either of the next two stages, we really shot ourselves in the foot. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Will, if you would. Is that basically what they told you?
That was the gist of the message. Yep. That's exactly it. And that only echoes what Keneally's predecessor, Jay Ash, had told Barnstable County. You know, at the last said when we were in Boston at the dredging meetings. That's exactly what happened with Barnstable County. And, you know, them taking all the grants and the money for all these towns, and then they weren't getting the dredging done. So the money, like Jay Ash said, when the money's allocated, the money's gone. Whether you use it or not, nobody gets it back. And everyone will be penalized who doesn't use it because they don't want to award somebody twice if they don't use it.
They probably can't encumber grant money. They probably have to spend it in the fiscal year it was designed to go.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Well, they do, and that's key to this issue. They also don't just send you the money. The funds have to be expended. So what I would like to do, this is a very uncertain year, what with the COVID-19 and the shutdown and all that. I would like to specifically pose a scenario to them that if, you know, we have uncertainty, we certainly don't want to restrict the program nor ourselves. But I'd like to pose the question to them, is it possible this year that if we were awarded, and we'll acknowledge we have uncertainty on schedule, and therefore uncertainty on our ability to perform by the end of December, if they would consider deferring it to December, knowing that we would tell them for sure by then, there would still be 6 months for them to go to an alternate. And it's certainly not their normal policy, but I'd like to pose the question for sure before we pull our hat out of the ring.
So the reason why this letter was drafted May 16th is because that's when I talked with them. So we're already up to recent terms, as in dates and COVID and everything else. They know that the uncertainty in our project doesn't lie or has anything to do with COVID or any other kind of emergency or getting paperwork in. It has to do with the actual uncertainty of being able to do the project.
True.
Not any other matter.
But is it worthwhile just to take another pass by? I mean, we have a period of time here. It's not until June 30th that the decision to go or no go goes in.
Well, that's when they award it, but I'm sure that their council is working very hard on coming up with that. And if, and if I was in contact with them not even a week ago where we discussed doing this, then
But this is
chances
the
are it's
first
pretty
time-
relevant and fresh information.
This is the first time, though, that this committee, the task force, has had an opportunity to talk with the different members about this particular issue of May 16th, which you said that's when they called you?
I spoke with them last on Friday. Was that May 15th?
Yes.
That's Saturday. So
Yeah.
May 15th.
Well, I think we're probably on board with the idea we don't want to penalize ourselves in the future. I think we probably all agree that the schedule is very tight. It's a long shot that the Corps would finish early enough for us to have meaningful time. So that's a true risk. But like I said, I would like to just float this one possible scenario past them, and if they clearly reject it, then I would say we need to submit that letter, and we could float this idea past them today, tomorrow, this week. We wouldn't be losing time, and then we would have an informed decision whether to go ahead and send that letter in and withdraw our application, or whether there might be some consideration where December would work for them. It's certainly not their
I think
normal, but
me drafting that letter and bringing it up after talking with them is an informed decision.
I'm sorry, say again, Will, I'm sorry.
I think that after my conversation with them, the drafting of that letter was the informed decision. Now it's being brought to the council to talk about it, but all this information has already been posed to them. So,
But it was posed without the group that had charge of this particular project.
no, it's charged by the department that's dealing with that department.
Yeah,
So
I
if
mean,
you
that's
want-
moot because we haven't sent the letter yet. That's the reason for this discussion. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. The discussion was held. It's being shared now with everyone. We have an opportunity to have this very discussion. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that since we haven't sent the letter yet.
Chris Mitrovato. If I can just speak a second. I think we made it pretty clear that in these discussions with contact at EOHED, that the scenarios, all these scenarios have been laid out, and their best advice to Will, from my understanding of my discussion with Will on this, is that this is the best path for this grant cycle, and is to withdraw it in this cycle and then resubmit it in the next cycle. And Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong on my interpretation of our conversation, but I also understood that they felt very strongly about our application in the next cycle and felt that this was the best path, and might potentially look very favorably on us in the next cycle because they had a chance to at least review the application. Is that correct?
Okay. And again, who specifically within the economic office was part of that discussion?
Well, you have the contact, Dave. I don't here.
Yeah, that was Nick and Secretary Keneally.
Secretary Keneally had the time off of his coronavirus 19 process that he's running
Yeah.
with the governor. That
I
seems
guess.
strange.
This is who the conversation came from. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't record it or take any identification.
And I thought also that these projects are voted upon by another group, like the Seaport Committee.
There's a whole
Goes through-
committee that votes on the project.
Pardon?
There's a whole committee that votes on the project.
Right, so is it their decision to go forward and give money towards somebody's grant, or is it Kennelly's decision?
Well, I'd assume the committee is the one reviewing it to put it through that process. And that is who we send down the chain, just like talking to me, is through the chain of command.
Okay, one other point that if the stars align for us and the Corps maintains and has a shortened schedule, and there is an opportunity for us to piggyback, we can still do it on our own nickel.
Yep.
So we need to keep that aware. And towards that end, I think we want to position ourselves to be able to do that. So when the bidders come out for the Corps, you know, we always talked about setting up an option for whoever is a successful bidder on the channel to at least have an option in place if the stars align. So I don't think we're necessarily saying we absolutely will not stay on course for that. If we get lucky, we can still do it. We won't have the benefit of this particular funding, but we can make a decision if we want to continue and do the piggyback with town funds.
Right.
So at that point, I guess maybe we'll bring this to closure.
Chris,
Senator, go ahead.
I want to say one thing, that when there's, you know, questions or confusion, also back in January or February when GEI came to our meeting, VR said very easily and clearly that they could help us with all these different questions, funding sources, grants and everything. So if you get a question, and I guess we have to ask Dan or Mike if there's approval to spend the money, but it is part of the dredging funding, you know, to ask them for any kind of consideration. You know what I mean?
For identifying grant opportunities, yes, although they've really not done that. We've been able to do that ourselves.
Right.
So far as interpreting what the Economic Council would say, I would say the direct communication that Will has would carry more weight than GEI's opinion.
Yeah, I'm just saying if Will or you are stuck or don't, you know, being in the future too, that they are very experienced in this area. So it's just my 2 cents. It sounds like it's going well, and Will has a good handle on it. So yeah, I agree with everything else that's been said.
I'm going to make a motion, a simple motion, so that we don't get involved in any of what else is going on. Just to rescind the letter as presented or written through Will and Mike and Dan. I make that as my motion.
I'm sorry, was your motion to rescind it or to send it?
Well, actually, to rescind the grant, so to send the letter.
To send the letter.
Yes, to rescind.
Okay, I second
I
the motion.
apologize.
I second the motion. So, all those in favor, blink once.
Aye.
Aye.
You
Those
actually,
opposed?
when we're doing a virtual meeting, you actually have to do a roll call vote. So you would want to hear Alfred, yes or no?
Alfred is voting yes.
Chris, yes or no?
Yes.
Skip, yes or no?
Yes.
So it passes by a 3-0 vote.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else for this call? If not, either way, I appreciate everyone taking the time out today to join the call and have a meaningful discussion. So thank you, everyone.
Everybody have a good day.
Thank you very much.